Hey, and welcome to the video update for the Inner Sphere variant tier list. There was recently a pretty significant change in quirks for about half a dozen mech chassis, and so I'm going to be going over what that's changed, as well as adding the King Crabs onto the variant tier list in the assaults. So let's review the change notes going down the list. First of all, the additions of the King Crabs. One of them made it to Tier 1, the other two are in Tier 2. We're looking at AC20s and a PPC in Tier 1, whereas the Tier 2 versions are focused more around brawling, and this build, which I think could be amazing, and it could be subpar. But I think if it ends up being amazing, then I'll put it in Tier 1. But right now, I'm not so sure, so I'm leaving it in Tier 2. This is also in Tier 2. It's functionally, well, it's not identical, but it's very similar to the Atlas S, which I've put it very near to in the tier ranking. And this is the Tier 1 with 2 AC20s and a PPC, which I just feel is the strongest build for it at the moment. I also changed the build on the Dragon Slayer to use a Gauss rifle instead of an AC10. I just feel like with the quirk to it, it's just better now. I mean, it was kind of better before. I liked the AC10 personally, but now it's undeniably better to use the Gauss rifle. Now, for the dragons, they got their quirks changed, but it seems to me like they got their quirks nerfed almost across the board. In particular, the 1C and the 5N, they lost a lot of what made them unique and special, and now they're just bleh. The 1C I've changed basically from Gauss and 2 ER large to Gauss and 4 mediums. It lost its ER large specific quirks for generic laser quirks, and it's not as strong at the super long range. It's a bit stronger at medium range, I suppose, but it's mainly going to be focused around short range, which is not where you want to be fighting in a mecha as fragile as a dragon. The Dragon 1N, I think it might have gotten a bit better. I think this one actually is pretty nice. It lost its specific ER large quirks again, but it did gain more generic energy quirks, which I used to fit a PPC, which I feel just syncs up better with the AC5s anyways. I've also changed the Dragon 5N lost its AC2 specific quirks for UAC5 quirks, which would be cool if it had 10 slots free in that right arm, but it only has 9, meaning that you can only run one UAC5 in that right arm. And so I've made it one UAC5, one AC5, and a medium pulse laser, and I've sadly moved it to the absolute bottom of the heavy tier list on the IS variants. It's just not that great of a build. The quirks are now not that great, and there's really not much else you can do with it that's special or good. I also updated the Fang build to use large lasers instead of, I think it was large pulse before. And the Thunderbolt 9S also got some nice extra ER PPC quirks that have resulted in it moving up in Tier 5. Real quick, I'm just going to open up the full change list of quirks. So for the Thunderbolts, the 9S got that stuff that really helped out its ER PPC. The heat gen went way up, that quirk, from 25% to 50%, and it also got some velocity quirks. So I think that does make it kind of legit as a hill humper with PPCs, or ER PPCs. But, and so I did move it up to the, I believe, top of Tier 5, or just behind the Fang. But I still don't, it's still pretty underwhelming to me, and so it's still in Tier 5. The 5SS got a little bit of a nerf on its heat generation for the medium pulse lasers. It got changed to a generic energy weapon thing instead of medium pulse specific, and it got reduced. I don't think it was necessary, especially considering how IS heavies have been underperforming in general, and the Thunderbolt 5SS was like a shining beacon of light amidst a sea of darkness. But at least it wasn't too heavy-handed of a nerf. It was 10%, but it's still good. It's still got the range, and it still does have heat generation quirks. The 9SE got a little buff to laser duration, which is nice, and the 5S got basically nothing. Just some extra structure, which doesn't really do much, since it's only 5 points. The catapults, while it did get, as you see, a large list of quirk changes, it didn't get changed in the tier list at all. I didn't even update any of the builds. Basically, they just made the existing builds stronger or weaker depending on the variant, but not stronger or weaker enough for me to think that a different build would be better or to think that it would change in its position. And the dragons, as we've already went over those, they just kind of got worse across the board, with the exception of the 1N and maybe the Fang. And the Flame actually got better too. The Flame didn't get much better, but it now has a ballistic weapon cooldown quirk instead of specific AC-20 range and velocity quirks. And cooldown is just always more useful on stuff like the AC-20. Alright, so that was nice, but again, it wasn't significant enough for me to move it from its current position. So let's move on to mediums. The Shadowhawks got a lot of minor quirk changes, as you see here, and for the most part it didn't really result in me doing anything. As you see here, the only thing I did was change the Shadowhawk 2D2 build that was already there to include extra ammo for the SRMs, which did get a cooldown quirk. But besides that, everything else for the Shadowhawks has stayed the same. The Kentaro Golden Boy did get its, it got a buff to its missile cooldown quirks, as well as getting it, removing the Alarm 5 specific stuff, and getting some medium pulse love. So that caused me to change the build on the Golden Boy to be medium pulse oriented, and I also moved it up within tier 3, but it is still in tier 3. Yeah. Then we're looking at Hunchback quirks. The 4J lost its ER large specific stuff, which doesn't really change too much in this IS tier list. So I just basically changed that to use mediums instead of an ER large laser, and everything else stayed the same. It didn't really change how powerful the build in general was, since it focused on the Lerm 10s already. The Hunchback 4SB, it got some pretty nice SRM 6 cooldown perks, and got rid of the range perks, so the build hasn't really changed, but I did move it up a little bit. It's still within the same tier though, because it didn't get that much stronger. Still, like, it's still just basically a lesser version of the Wolverine 7K. That's what I see it as. And then we got the Gridiron, which did get a pretty significant overhaul. It removed all the UAC stuff and changed it to Gauss rifles. And it's like a 50% cooldown quirk on the Gauss rifle, which is nice. But it's... I didn't move it. I think that it's still very appropriate in its current spot, and sadly that spot is in tier 4. It just doesn't have enough firepower or DPS, even with that amazing Gauss rifle cooldown quirk. And now into lights. As you'll see oh yeah, I also changed the Centurion 9 AL build in the mediums to be large laser focus instead of large pulse. I think overall that was a positive change. Now it gets 2 large lasers and 2 mediums, as opposed to 1 large pulse and 3 mediums. And in general, I feel like it's just a bit stronger now. The CN9A I also changed from SRM4 focused to SRM6 focused. The AC-10 stuff I'm basically just completely ignoring, because it's not useful. That if you use the AC-10, you'll just be running a worse version of the CN9AH, in my opinion. And the Vindicator got a whole bunch of shit that doesn't matter, and I didn't change it in the builds because this shit doesn't matter. It's like PPC stuff, which, like, okay, I'm already running that stuff, but it's not a good idea to run PPCs in a... Like, you're better off running PPCs in Vindicators in most of the variants than most other weapons. But, like, the Blackjack 3 just completely outdoes it with PPCs. It's got higher mounts, it's got... just everything is better. Ugh. Okay, alright. Moving on. We're talking about Jenners. Not much changed here. They gave Jenner F a nice little perk, which was needed, but it's not enough to make it better than the Firestarter H again. The Jenner K got some changes to its medium pulse heat generation, basically a nerf. And the Jenner D got SRM4 or missile cooldown instead of range, so that's nice. But again, that's not really a huge deal. Firestarters did change significantly. Firestarter A got nerfed. I do think that this nerf was kind of needed, especially when you consider how tiny it is, 15% to 10% heat generation. It was a little ridiculous how cool you stayed when you were just constantly firing in that thing. The Firestarter K got basically changed to an overall energy range quirk and laser duration, but that's literally all that changed. It's a little better than it was, I think, because you can your laser duration's shorter, and small lasers before nobody was bothering. The Firestarter S, though, this is the one that I've been waiting to talk about. It's amazing. It's pretty much it. It's just amazing. Fucking 5 medium pulse lasers with a 30% heat generation quirk mean that it's going to be doing, I think the number I came up with was 14 total heat per alpha strike, which is the same as 3.5 unquirked medium or medium pulse lasers before. So it only has, I'll show you the build that I have for it. It only has 11 double heat sinks, which is low, but when you consider that it's basically the equivalent of 3.5 medium lasers, I don't think it's that low. I think it's pretty good. It's basically the Cicada 2B build, but on a Firestarter with jump jets, as opposed to a medium without jump jets. So I just think that this is going to be a big deal. I moved it up into tier 2, at the top of tier 2. Might move up to tier 1 in the next update. Fingers crossed it does, but it hasn't been thoroughly tested enough for me to say that this is a mech that you should definitely be taking every time you're in a light. So I left it in tier 2 for now, until it gets solidified as a powerful force. Other than that, there was some commando changes, which don't really matter. Overall, there were buffs, I would say, but really, they just kind of made the existing builds a bit stronger in most cases. So there was nothing really huge going on there. It did result in me changing the build on the Commando 3A, but that's it. Sorry, I thought my dog was over there. It's just the music making these little noises. Alright, anyways, I think that's it for the Inner Sphere variant tier list update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.